main thing with a piece of equipment like this is that you want to walk away from it without being injured or without having property damage. If you want to have a piece of equipment that you want to do some damage with, a crane's a great place to start. So the place that I usually start when I'm talking to people about operating these units is the human factor. Well, let's face it, if human beings aren't involved, you're probably not going to have a problem. So the first thing, of course, is to know how to operate the crane and to have it, in a configuration where it's appropriate for where you're going to use it. The first thing I'd like to talk about is a couple of things about human nature. Number one, especially when you're doing a heavy or a marginal lift that's near the capacity of the crane, if you are distracted, if you're irritated, if you're angry, if your wife stepped on your toes this morning, whatever happened, and you're upset, don't operate the crane. Because if you're distracted, the thing about lifting equipment is you've always got to have your attention completely focused on what you're doing. And I understand a lot of this is very basic. I don't mean to insult you guys. It's just that I always like to start at the beginning to make sure everybody understands. The other thing is that when we're talking about crane accidents, 95% of those crane accidents are due to operator error. And another thing about human nature is when you're operating a piece of equipment like this in a plant setting, and especially if you have a lot of younger fellows around, they tend to get fascinated with what you're doing. And so the first thing that happens is you're in the crane operating it, and you start to draw a crowd. You get one guy, you get two guys, you get three guys, and then inevitably somebody in that group begins to give you advice. And they begin to go this way, or raise the boom, or do this, that, and the other thing. When you're operating this piece of equipment, especially due to the fact that this one has an enclosed operator's cab, some of them have an open ROPS, just a cage on the top. That's a little bit easier to be able to hear and also to be able to see. So the operator's cab does restrict you just a little bit. So you want to have a minimum of 2 people when you're operating this crane. You should never operate it by yourself because you cannot necessarily see what's happening 360 degrees all the way around the crane because, of course, this is not the type of crane where the cab rotates with the turret. The cab is stationary. So you should have somebody in the cab and you should have somebody on the outside being your load spotter and watching what your load is doing, watching your overhead clearances, watching your swing clearances, making sure that your outriggers aren't sinking into the ground, so on and so forth, just so somebody can spot you. You can have, in my recommendation, up to 3 people, 2 spotters on the ground, 1 operator in the cab. But the thing is about the 2 spotters on the ground, one guy has to be giving the directions. You can't have both guys talking to the operator. One of those spotters on the ground should be tasked to speak to the operator so that there's no cross signals, and you should never get in a hurry, of course. Absolutely don't get in a hurry, with the crane. That's one of the keys to it. The thing about these carry net